Hello, Steve White, TrekBoy89 for SteveArts89. I tried to do a short version of this video a few times, but I don't care. I'm just going to take as long as it takes. So I'm sort of proud of my fellow Star Trek fans by trying to help the new Trek fans and the Drekkies understand the multiverse nature of Star Trek. And I've seen a bunch of graphs lately, like the one I'm looking at now, which says Star Trek has two distinct universes, and goes on to actually show in picture form the different universes. So we've got canon created by Gene Roddenberry. Now I think you should just call it the original canon universe, because just calling it canon, it seems just like a category. So I just refer to it as the original canon universe. Created by Gene Roddenberry, and they've got Captain Kirk played by William Shatner, Captain Pike played by Jeffrey Hunter, Spock played by Leonard Nimoy, and then they've got a line that says the Kelvin Prime universe, and it's got based on Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, but created by Bad Robot and Secret Hideout, and everything they created that's original, they own. And they've got the Kelvin Kirk played by Chris Pine, the Kelvin Pike played by Bruce Greenwood, the Kelvin Spock played by Zachary Quinto, I'm not sure how you say his name. And then you got the Prime Kirk, who we're not going to acknowledge that actor because he's bland and doesn't matter. Prime Pike played by Anson Mount, and Prime Spock played by Leonard Nimoy and Ethan Peck, who, funny, I was watching a Gregory Peck movie a little while ago where he was young, and I kept seeing Ethan in there, like I could see the family resemblance. But unfortunately, Leonard Nimoy played Prime Spock, thinking it was original Spock, because that was a huge mess. Now, the reason that this is sort of an issue, there's a couple of reasons, but one of the main reasons is there's this really ugly thing happening in the fandom now where, because they've established, again, because it's been established sort of in Discovery and Strange New Worlds that their universe is a different universe or a different timeline from the other Star Treks. But they just kept ignoring this. But the Lower Decks one really just seemed to really just solidify that Discovery is in a different universe. But they're trying to decanonize it and saying that that Star Trek Discovery is decanonized because it's set in a different universe. Well, it's not, because all the different alternative universes are canon. Everything on screen is canon. So the Mirror Universe, the universe from Lazarus's adventures, the universes from Parallels, from all the time ship incursions in Voyager, all those universes are canon, they all count. It just means we no longer have to try and make Discovery and the original Star Trek go together, and it's really hard for Star Trek fans who are familiar with the original Star Trek to try and force this new show into the canon when it's not only does it not work, but it's not even trying to be compatible, because it is a different universe and a different timeline and everything. And then you have the new Star Trek fans coming in, the new Trek fans, the Drekkies, who don't know this history, don't care about it, don't like the old shows, and trying to convince them that their show they love is going to morph into this show they hate from the 60s. The Paramount's trying to say it's the same universe, the same characters, the same year and everything. It just isn't. It doesn't work. And it's just insulting to try and convince people it is. And I don't know why they didn't just go with the multiverse in the first place and just say, this is a new Star Trek in a new universe, and market it to new people. And just, I don't know why they didn't take that approach. I mean, it gets a bit confusing, but when they did the JJ films, this thing started. Basically, Star Trek was owned by Paramount. They created Paramount TV, and then when Viacom separated Paramount TV, everything from Paramount TV was given to CBS, which means Paramount didn't own it anymore and had no access to it. So Paramount, through Bad Robot, created an alternative license where they could use Star Trek, but they couldn't use the canon Star Trek. They could use the names and that and the title, but they had to have a certain distance because CBS was making billions from the merchandise in the original Star Trek, and they didn't want any brand confusion. So they had to create this alternative Star Trek, and that was fine for the most part because they wanted to do a reboot anyway. So what they reasoned at the time, and this was in the press and in interviews and that, and it was known, that they were creating this new Star Trek in a new timeline so they could have their little bubble that wouldn't affect the other Star Trek. So that was their way of saying, we're going to give you a new Star Trek, a rebooted Star Trek through this new timeline, but it's not going to touch or endanger or threaten your original Star Trek. All that still exists, and they're just separate, and you can enjoy both. And fans were fairly accepting of that, and the original film, the first film, did really well. Unfortunately, it didn't deliver in the next film. It said they boldly go, and then they just went back to Earth and did a terrorist plot, and no one liked it. It was all dark and not Star Trek, and trying to be the Dark Knight version of the Star Trek as a trilogy. It just was a mess. And then no one came back for the third film because when at the end of Into Darkness they said we're going to boldly go, no one believed them. And the third film was more of a Star Trek film, but still had issues. But yeah, no one went back for it. So what happened was the studio felt like, no one likes this new alternative universe. We can't tell people that this is an alternative universe. We have to say that's the original Star Trek universe. So when they were developing the original Star Trek, JJ and that, they said this at the time, they thought they could just create this timeline in the original Star Trek universe and it'd be fine. But then Paramount said, no, there has to be a totally different universe. You have to create your own Star Trek universe. So they created what is now known as the Prime Universe. It was originally called the JJ Universe, then it was called the Kelvin Universe, because although it's Nero's ship that creates the time incursion, it's the Kelvin that encounters it, and it was named after his dad, so you want to call it the Kelvin Universe. It turned into the Kelvin Timeline and the Prime Universe. And then Paramount tried to convince everyone that the Prime Universe included the original Star Trek, when it didn't, its own universe. It's the JJ version of the original canon universe because they couldn't use it. So that's what happened. And this was all talked about in interviews at the time where they said we thought that we could just create a timeline in the original Star Trek universe and it would be fine. Then we were told we had to create a different universe, and the Prime Universe is our own version of the original Star Trek. And it was all known. But then the first film did okay, but then when the second film, it just didn't work. That's when they started to change their marketing and do this revisionist version. And because the new Star Trek fans have come into this not knowing any of that, not understanding any of that, just knowing the current sort of Paramount version of everything, they will argue with Star Trek fans that, that's not how it was, even though we were there and they weren't. And it comes from a place of being told your Star Trek's not good enough. And the reason why this happens is, well, there's problems with the new shows. They're not as good as the original Star Trek, and they don't have the elements that made Star Trek unique, and they try to be generic science fiction, try to appeal to the mass audience, the general audience, and they've kind of ruined Star Trek on one level. Now, as far as just them being generic science fiction shows, they're fine. They're not as bad as everyone says on their own, but when you try and put them into Star Trek, it just doesn't work, whether the universe or just, production-wise and legacy-wise, they just don't work. And the reason why certain Drekkies and Chuds, certain maggots and Chuds are jumping on the multiverse thing and different universe thing for Discovery is because Discovery was a diverse show and was all about representation and diversity, and they hate representation and diversity. They want to eliminate that because they're a bunch of white supremacists, and their overall goal is to eliminate white people and coloured people and gay people and all the different minorities. That's just their agenda. And the pop culture wars is all about, establishing that and trying to, make Hollywood great again. It's the sort of thing they want to go backwards, because they're a bunch of bigots and white supremacists, and they don't want any diversity representation, so they want to eliminate that from Star Trek like they want to eliminate in the real world. So that's why they're jumping on this and saying, it's decanonized now, it doesn't matter, it's eliminated, when it's not. It's still canon, it's just a different universe, and we no longer have to try and wrestle the two totally different universes together and try and make them work or flow into each other, when we can just look at them as totally separate universes, and just look at it that way. So I just want to do a video about that because I really appreciate the fact people are trying to literally illustrate for New Trek fans and Discovery fans and Drekkies how the different universes work, why they work. And it's frustrating to know how this all happened in real time back in the day and have it all be revised and have all those old articles and interviews disappear and have people basically turn around and say, no, that never happened when you were there and they weren't. It's really frustrating and it's funny, but it's also kind of disturbing how these, chuds and bigots and, maggots want to eliminate Discovery, not because it wasn't the best Star Trek and had all these actual legitimate in-universe production issues. They want to eliminate it because of their racism and bigotry and everything. So here's my 10-minute version of the video I already did, which went for like 5 minutes. But I just want to get into all of that because at the end of the day, Discovery and Strange New Worlds are not that bad for like a generic science fiction show. It's not Star Trek. They tried to create something alternative and it doesn't really work for anyone. So, but at the same time, it's not as bad as they make out, and they make out it's that bad because they want to destroy it, because of their issues and their bigotry and their agenda, because they have such issues with diversity and representation, which is the only thing those shows get right, but then they push it as the only thing and the core, and that just, it makes it even more offensive to these people, and it just, is counterproductive to a certain extent. But I just want to comment on that, so that's my video, and keep the memes and graphs and everything coming. Eventually, God willing, if we can get these people to actually acknowledge that the multiverse exists and all the different universes are valid, and their Star Trek is not less because we don't like it, even though it kind of is not Star Trek. But it's still a mess, but it's not as bad as it was, and I think we can come to some point of making our peace with all of this and existing in a multiverse. That's what I'm sort of trying to suggest and hoping will happen.